Hey everybody, it's Mark from the Geek Church. Normally I do product reviews on this channel, but I'm going to start something a little bit different here. Because honestly, I think we need to talk about M3GAN. Yeah, I've used this video channel to talk about just stuff that I like, just in geek culture. I talked about Invincible once, and there's going to be a new season of that coming soon. I definitely want to bring up M3GAN because I believe that this movie talks a lot about our relation to technology. And if there's one thing that I wanted to talk about when I started this channel, it's basically our relation to technology and how it has changed us, just as a species or a society as a whole. Okay, so M3GAN is of course a movie, but honestly, it feels like a January movie. And if you're not familiar with that, let's just put it this way. I'm sure you're familiar with movies, and I mean, a lot of really good movies come out during the holidays, a lot of blockbusters, similar to the summertime. I get the feeling that studios bank on the money of people returning to the theaters in January, and so they don't really concentrate on releasing anything big at this time. So a lot of times they'll get films that people are trying to succeed with, but you get the feeling that the studios don't really believe in the projects very well. So they basically just shove out stuff in the theaters, and you'll get stuff like, I don't know, Kangaroo Jack. That's just the one I'm thinking of. M3GAN is a Blumhouse film, and of course Blumhouse puts out a lot of great horror films, and it is classified as a horror film, but honestly I don't really think of it that way. It's not very often you get a PG-13 horror film. And if you do get one, the horror is more based on suspense, and rather than showing bloody violence. And there's been some exceptions to the rule of that have been actually very decent. If you've seen a Wes Craven film called Red Eye, it was PG-13, and I thought that film was very well done. Now, M3GAN looks to be like a slasher film. I mean, you've got essentially the antagonist, which is a doll robot, and this thing looks like it could take on Chucky. Here's the thing that obviously needs to be said from the get-go. I've never really seen Child's Play, but I know about the concept of Chucky, and I believe that the origin of Chucky lies in the fact that he is essentially brought to life due to some spell, or some criminal puts his mind in this doll, and then the doll goes nuts. And that's basically the premise of that. Yes, horror movies tend to rely, it feels like when you think horror movie, you usually think of some antagonist who runs around and slashing people. Slasher films have sort of become the horror staple of this thing, where essentially you've got a bunch of characters and then they're just sort of being bumped off one by this guy or this malevolent entity or something like that. M3GAN appears to be that in this. I was fully prepared to watch this film with the idea that it's so bad it's good. The problem is, I like M3GAN. I think this is a good film. And it does not follow horror tropes. It does do certain things that I have to go like, these are more sci-fi tropes than anything else. But I think on the whole, M3GAN is a good movie, and I've watched it twice, and I could easily watch it again. So the thing about M3GAN is that M3GAN is a toy, and the way the film opens up is with a toy commercial. And if you've ever watched toy commercials, those that are designed to be put into, say, children's programming, toy commercials have a certain rhythm to them, where essentially like there'll be like this narrator who often sounds like a child, and they say, "Introducing something something, it's a whole lot of fun," and they do something like that. The commercial that they show at the beginning of M3GAN for Perpetual Pets is somewhat realistic, except for one part. They actually show at the beginning of this film that this little girl has a dog and it died. And then they're talking about how introducing Perpetual Pets, a pet that won't die. And I'm going like, okay, that's a little bit downer note for any toy commercial to start off on. So yeah, that's not realistic, but at the same time, I see exactly what they're trying to say. They're basically trying to say that a dog who is a companion of little kids and something that's organic and something that's life can be replaced by something that is artificial and crazy. And yeah, I think that's kind of interesting that they kind of went off in that direction there. The thing about perpetual pets is they say, like, don't overfeed it or it'll poop all over the place. Now, here's the thing that you have to load that poop there, right? That doesn't just come preloaded with that poop, and does it make that poop all the time? Because it can't do that, because it's a toy. You have to do that, and I don't know. Anyway, the toy commercial gives way to someone who actually owns this toy, a little girl named Katie, and she's on a trip with her parents, and she's in the back seat, and the parents are obviously going like, hey man, can you turn that thing down? We've got, like, and they're worried about her screen time because, well, everybody's worried about that now these days. Screen time is a major theme in M3GAN, and you just really can't avoid it. And if you listen closely in that conversation at the beginning, they're mentioning somebody named Gemma, who is Katie's aunt, and that's going to be important later on. And I actually like the fact that the film plants that early. Sadly, the parents die. A snow truck hits them. I don't know how Katie survives, but that's what happens. Okay, they cut to a city that I'm pretty familiar with, Seattle. Kind of grew up near it, and they show the skyline of it, and they introduce Funky, this toy company, and the way they introduce it is odd. They like show like the interior of it, and they're testing out toys, and you can hear an announcer go, "Welcome to Funky," and I'm going like, that feels like lazy exposition, because I don't really think that there are people inside. I've never been in any toy company like that, but I don't think that any business has somebody constantly an announcer going like, "Welcome to such and such, where we blah blah blah," and they say it over and over again, because that would just really be grating on the workers, wouldn't it? That's really lazy exposition. This is where we're introduced to Gemma, and she's building this robot in the basement of Funky. Now, don't ask me why, because here's the thing. She was actually given an assignment to make a cheaper perpetual pets, because the CEO comes down here and says like, hey, listen, some company's making a rip-off version of our toy, so we need to make a cheaper version of our toy to compete with that. So basically, Gemma and her team are supposed to be working on a cheaper version of this perpetual pets, which looks like a Furby on steroids. Or actually, it looks like a Furby on crack. That's been kind of done to death. Anyway, but yeah, so they basically work on this little robot. Now, this is a robot that's called M3GAN, this Model 3 generative android. I'll give them points for trying to make some sort of acronym out of this, but they didn't really use the N in that, did they? Android, I guess, is sort of like, you know, otherwise it could be just mega. But if that's the Model 3, was the Model 1 called M3GAN? Because, what was the Model 2 called? M3GAN? What's the letter for number 2? So I'm not really sure how much these perpetual pets kind of know and stuff like that. At the beginning, when we see a perpetual pet, it seems to understand a conversation and add to it with a fart sound or something like that. But it's not really known if it's... I think the Furbies work this way, where they can sort of tell what's going on around them, and they have like language and stuff like that, and that's kind of the way they work. They have some programming in them that allows them to grow. And so I think they want to put this on M3GAN and make it more advanced. And of course, you know, honestly, that's, I guess, a good idea. But at the present time, M3GAN just kind of blows up, and they put a face on it, and it kind of melts. And yeah, that sounds went about as well as it could. Okay, so Katie has to stay with Gemma because her parents are dead, and yeah, and then they introduce this sort of thing where the neighbor has a dog who's getting through the fence, and of course, if you've seen enough movies, you know that, yeah, this is going to be important later. Now, honestly, I really like the relationship between Gemma and Katie. I actually think that this is the movie's strength. When they enter the house, Gemma's got all these toys, but they're, of course, collectibles, and of course, Katie, being a child, wants to play with them, and she can't. When she mentions the fact that, hey, what happened to that perpetual pet I gave you? That was a huge trigger. Maybe you don't want to do that. And there's a scene after that where essentially Katie wants Gemma to read her story, but Gemma doesn't really have any kids' books. But she says, like, oh, I'll just download it on the app. And of course she's going like, well, I guess it needs to take some time to download. And honestly, I think this is what you're truly trying to say in this film, that there is a disconnect between the generations. And technology, which is supposed to maybe bridge this gap, really isn't doing that good of a job, honestly. And Like how I mentioned with dogs before, toys replacing dogs. In this case, we have apps replacing this concept of story time, something that's really a good thing between parent, guardian, and child, which, yeah, it's just how it's showing how technology can ruin golden family moments. Okay, there is a scene that feels kind of forced but necessary. There's a social worker named Lydia that visits the house to see if Katie's being put in a good environment. Of course, Gemma is not prepared to be a parent and is doing the best she can. And I think at some point in time, they talk about the collectibles on the shelf and how Katie can't touch them, but then Gemma says, like, sure you can. And then she kind of rips open one of the boxes of them. A scene which I felt like, okay, I get what you're going for here with this scene, but you didn't have to rip open the box, Gemma. You could have just opened it up and then put it back in the box later. There's ways of doing this. You know you can do this. I don't think that would have affected the condition of it. But, yeah, the scene feels forced. I'd have to say, like, every film has scenes like this that don't really work out as good as maybe they're expecting. So, hey. So, of course, here's the deal. Gemma might not be able to take care of Katie because... they bring up this subject that Katie has grandparents that would be willing to take care of her, but they don't really delve into too much of this here. Okay, so M3GAN is one of those movies that's a lot like Home Alone. There's a lot like... In Home Alone, there's a lot of stars that have to line up in order to get the plot to even work. Kevin has to sleep upstairs because he was punished. The power goes out, so they wake up nearly late for their plane. They take 2 vans there, and when they do a head count, some kid who we've never seen in the film before just shows up, and they count him accidentally, so they think they've got a proper head count. And it takes until they get to until the plane is in the air before they realize they leave Kevin behind. That is a lot of forced stuff to get one specific thing to happen. And M3GAN is no different. It has a lot of forced things to get, obviously, this thing to happen. And a lot of the things that to get this to happen are actually somewhat believable. It looks like Gemma has a history with robotics. There's a scene where Katie is kind of looking around while Gemma's trying to work, and Gemma introduces Katie to Bruce, this interesting robot that she is able to take control with sort of these hand controls. And she has Bruce talk to Katie by just doing the voice herself. And what's interesting is how Katie has that line where she says, if I had a toy like Bruce, I don't think I would need another toy again. So this is like sort of a catalyst line. A lot of films have this where one character will say a line and that starts the ball rolling and actions get going. In this case for Gemma, she decides to take a week to make M3GAN. Honestly, I don't really know why it takes only a week, because she actually delays her little project for making a cheaper perpetual pet. And honestly, to me, I feel like if she could have made it in a week, why didn't she make it before? This is one of these kind of things in a film. I suppose necessity is the mother of invention is what they're going for. It's somewhat believable, but at the same time, M3GAN is quite advanced for what she does. It's not software that you could probably develop in a week, but let's just assume that she's been working on this for a while. So I was willing to suspend my disbelief there. And then, of course, we're introduced to M3GAN. And, of course, there's a lot of uncanny valley thing going on with her. The way she moves is just extremely creepy. And the fact that people don't even see it as creepy is odd to me, is very odd. The fact that Katie bonds with it pretty much right away is somewhat believable, but at the same time, I'm kind of going, it's strange that she would. Maybe kids would be... Maybe this film was trying to say that kids would bond with something with technology that's technological, even though as adults it creeps us out. And this is done several times, which I'm going to mention here. There's actually kind of a sweet scene that I really like, is when M3GAN does a drawing for Katie, and it doesn't look like she does anything at first. And then she spills water on it, which appears by accident. And then it turns out the water somehow manages to reveal the picture. Now, I couldn't help but wonder, how did she do that? Or what process was able to set that up? That feels like that would be something that would be pre-programmed by another human to do as a bonding activity for the first time you meet with M3GAN. But that, I don't think that's something that M3GAN could think of herself. And this is something that I think the film is really struggling with, is how much does M3GAN know at any given time? And how much is M3GAN able to think for herself? This is one of the challenges of this thing that I'm sure the writers had a fun time thinking of. Now, when Katie meets M3GAN, the CEO is watching this and seeing that seeing how this goes, and he says a line that I really like. He says, "That's not a simulation. The kid is not an actress." Now, the thing is, that line could actually refer to M3GAN or Katie, honestly. And this actually, I didn't really do a lot of research in here, but I don't really know how much effects is involved with M3GAN. I don't know how they did that effect. And I think the fact that I don't know how it's done, is it done practically, or did they actually like have a stand-in there with like dots and green screen kind of makeup on here, and then they added that kind of thing later? The fact that I don't know, I think, is great. The fact that it is, that I can really just sort of, and the fact is, I haven't even wanted to even look into how they did that. Okay, so once Katie is bonded to M3GAN, they use that word. You see like a montage of her playing with M3GAN, and there's a scene where like there's a really funny scene where it's like Gemma realizes that Katie doesn't flush the toilet and reminds her, but then M3GAN reminds her, and after a while Katie listens. There's a really funny scene where M3GAN just says, "Oh, please flush the toilet," and by the time it gets to like the third time, M3GAN's going, "Katie, seriously, flush the toilet." And I'm kind of going like, suddenly her tone switches, where M3GAN, at first M3GAN is very happy and jovial, but she can kind of get an edge to her, which is sort of interesting, and they seem to show that a lot. And now during the montage where they show Katie and M3GAN playing together, they're doing this little sales pitch that Gemma has written. They talk about support parents, but not replace them. But this is clearly what is happening with M3GAN. M3GAN is clearly replacing the parents. And this is sort of the issue that we're doing here. And then they also realize that M3GAN doesn't seem to shut off when M3GAN should shut off. It's like, and then Gemma says, well, they didn't have time to put the parental controls where she went live. So yeah, they rushed this. This is a theme in a lot of these science fiction stories where somebody wants to get something going on, but they rush it. You saw this in Jurassic Park. When they were doing this park, they were trying to do this constantly thing. They were trying to do it fast, but they, of course, lost sight of what was, how dangerous that it actually was. And I get the feeling like this has very similar themes. Now, the more that Katie plays with M3GAN, we start to see more creepy moments happen in this film. We're starting to see like this thing, but there's a lot of really great moments as well. There's a scene where M3GAN sees a butterfly and doesn't really know how to think about it, and we're actually trying to think about how M3GAN is thinking about this, which I really like. But of course, there's the dog that we were introduced before attacks Katie and M3GAN, and M3GAN, of course, is looking at the dog, and yeah, there's some premeditation happening there. And she also looks at the neighbor too. Yeah, we can tell what's going to happen next. Okay, eventually they're going to reveal M3GAN to a bunch of backers or something like that, just important people. And so they have a scene where Katie is just playing with M3GAN, and it seems like the activity that they planned was M3GAN was going to show her how to do some arts and crafts project. But Katie starts crying in the middle of this presentation. Now, this is a scene that's done like with like one of those one-way mirror kind of glass things, and the kid is kept there, and there's just people trying to see what happens. And the thing is, when Katie starts crying, like they don't immediately stop the demonstration to take care of Katie. They decide, we're going to let M3GAN try and help her, which honestly is kind of interesting because M3GAN does. M3GAN walks over to Katie, sings her a song, which honestly, did M3GAN write this song? I don't even know. And I think that's sort of kind of the fun part about watching this film, is you wonder how much of this programming is M3GAN really taking advantage of. And you realize M3GAN is becoming a life form, which is very great. And this leads to a scene where Gemma is trying to talk to Katie, but Katie's more interested in spending time with M3GAN. And of course, Gemma decides to use, hey, M3GAN, shut off. And it's like, you know, it's like, hey, why are you shutting, and Katie's all like, why are you shutting Megan off and stuff like that, and you realize there's a bit of a huge kind of disconnect that's happening between them, which I really enjoy, and I think that this is what this film is trying to do, and it's very much succeeding. I will give it that. And then, of course, there's this odd scene where Lydia is meeting with Katie, and Megan's there. But here's the thing. When Lydia is trying to talk to Katie, Katie's starting to cry, and then Megan just shows up. And Lydia didn't even know she was even there, I guess. I don't know if she's been introduced to Megan at that point. I feel like this scene might have been done another way. But there's a great scene where Megan just basically says, you made her cry. And Lydia, the psychologist, goes like, that was not my intention. And Megan says, and yet that's what happened. And it's really friggin', it's really well done, honestly. This is when Lydia starts talking about attachment theory. And this, I really like the fact that the film is actually bringing this up, but it doesn't necessarily have to. There are some times in which, like, you don't have to bring up whatever sort of psychological thing you're trying to show. You should just show it. And honestly, it's still pretty good because it kind of gets me thinking about how Katie is starting to become attached to Megan when she should be attached to Gemma. And yeah. And then this leads to this more conflict where Katie won't eat all of her pizza and Gemma wants her to, and Megan essentially starts to disagree. And that's when I think Gemma shuts Megan off with a remote. For some reason, she's got a remote for this now. I don't know where that came from. And then, of course, Gemma is insisting that Katie go to school, but Katie doesn't really want to go to school. Apparently she was homeschooled, maybe. I don't really know. But, yeah, when Katie breaks down, has a tantrum, starts to run away, Gemma grabs her. And that's when Megan just goes like, let her go. And her voice gets all very creepy. And here's the thing. When Megan says this, the lights kind of flicker. There's no reason for the lights to flicker. There's really no logical reason for that to happen. But it does create an interesting... Unless they're showing like Megan can sort of master technology now, which honestly, that does happen. Remember when I was talking about how certain scenes in this film feel forced? This one also feels very much forced. Megan goes to this school that's apparently outdoors or something like that, and she won't go unless Megan comes. But of course, you know, they can't do that because Megan is an experimental toy. They don't want to bring it out to the world, but they say, but this place has this toy table that they could put her on, and honestly, I don't know why you would do that, because Megan would stand out among any toy, and she does. It's really funny, though, to see the teacher meet Katie and think that Megan is actually another one of her daughters, or like another child. And then she looks at Megan, who looks back at her and just goes, Jesus Christ! And I just think that's so funny, the fact that she has that initial reaction, and nobody else seems to be having that initial reaction. They all want to see this toy in action. And this just shows, like, maybe why Megan is kind of difficult to swallow as a concept, and yet at the same time, believable. I'm hoping I can find some footage of this, but there is a prequel to Battlestar Galactica called Caprica. And it wasn't very good. I don't even think it lasted a season. Because prequels don't work, okay? But there's a scene where they're trying to train the Cylons. And at one point in time, the Cylons basically, they're supposed to shoot the special target, but then the Cylon robots that they're just creating decides to shoot their creators. And, you know, the creators are safe behind a glass thing, but you see paintballs hit them. And all you can think about is, like, didn't you see this coming? You built a robot, it comes to life, and then it comes after you. It feels like every sci-fi thing that takes this premise doesn't see this coming. And I think really that's the whole point, isn't it? Well, of course it's got to go crazy, or at least Megan's got to go crazy. So, and there's this, and yeah, I would have to say it's a bit forced on this part too, because there's this kid at the school that Katie's going to. It's just nuts. There's a scene where he bullies Megan because he's nuts. There's one scene where he takes Megan and just takes off her shoe, and there were times I went like, what is he going to do to her? Is he taking off her clothes? Because honestly, if you were going to make a M3GAN, you could make an adult M3GAN. And yeah, I could go there, and I'm not. But honestly, I feel like realistically, maybe we would have gone there first before we made a M3GAN. And this is where the scene gets, I think this is the same in the PG-13 version, but M3GAN literally rips this kid's ear off. And the kid, Brandon, this delinquent, runs away, and M3GAN chases him after on all fours, which I don't really see a need for. But I don't really know why they show her doing that. I think it would be cooler if she just kind of hopped, like jumped, and something like that. I don't know. But anyway, the kid's hit by a truck. No one really sees it happen, except for, I believe, Katie, who lies about it a little later. And by the way, I should know that when M3GAN is, I think this is shown earlier in the film, and maybe I forgot to mention it, but when M3GAN sees somebody, there's like this emotional readout kind of thing, because they do that kind of, I don't know, that kind of Terminator vision kind of thing that you see in a lot of these types of films. And I don't know how that could possibly be programmed, and I don't even know if we have that. And it's making me wonder if we have this technology today. Okay, so when Katie covers for M3GAN, there's a really great scene where they discuss, it's at night, and Katie is discussing with M3GAN that she's having a hard time sleeping, and M3GAN sings the song Titanium. And considering that M3GAN is made of titanium, it's really odd and at the same time quite appropriate, creepy, and also heartfelt as well. It is a mix of great stuff going on here. And yeah, M3GAN gets rid of the neighbor and her little dog too. And with the neighbor, it's weird because she uses some sort of chemical defoliant. Apparently that was mentioned in the first scene, so I guess that's kind of poetic justice, I guess. Poetic justice and a lot of like things like this play in a lot of things in these type of films. So naturally, this whole thing with their neighbor is investigated, and if they even know about the fact that what happened to Brandon earlier. And there's this, during the scene, there's this really cool detective that I really like. I often feel like there should be like another movie about this guy, or perhaps they got him from the X-Files or something. I don't know. It just feels right to me. Okay, I think I forgot to mention something, but Gemma has in her house something called Elsie. It looks like something like Alexa, but obviously they didn't contact Amazon to get the the rights for that. But essentially, Elsie starts talking, and I get the feeling that M3GAN might be taking control of that or something, because it's starting to talk to her when it shouldn't. And speaking of things that don't talk when they shouldn't, M3GAN is starting to get a little bit in Gemma's face. So much so that she has to do the See This Pen game, and if you're not familiar with the See This Pen game, neither am I. But apparently if you have M3GAN look at a pen, she'll look at it, and you can turn her off. I guess that's sort of something that you can do. So at this point in time, I think Gemma's starting to realize that M3GAN's a little bit dangerous. And so when she shuts her down, it's funny because Katie kind of throws a fit. M3GAN is her friend, and they just kind of throw her in the back, taped together in bubble wrap. And seriously. And Gemma brings her into the Funzy company, and or Funky, I think it's called. And they're trying to figure out what's wrong with M3GAN. And even Gemma's team is like, come on, she's 4 feet tall, she's a toy. And I'm just going like, you didn't see this coming. Really, you didn't see this coming. And having a panic attack over this is David Lynn, who's the CEO of the company, who we've seen in earlier scenes. It's weird that his name is David Lynn. It almost sounds like David Lynch. Are we really going for that? Honestly feels like it could be a David Lynch film, this film. But honestly, I'm not that too familiar with David Lynch. But it is kind of weird, and this film kind of feels like maybe his wheelhouse. Okay, there's a really good scene here where Katie's trying to talk with Lydia, that psychologist, social worker that we've seen before. Dialogue gets really real here. And by real, I mean like this is kind of what your film is all about. And where essentially like, there's a line they said, if something is broke, you fix it. And because apparently that's kind of the thing there. Katie wants to be reunited with M3GAN, wants her fixed. But there's also another line here when Katie just says, when she's here, M3GAN's here, I don't feel like this. But then Gemma says, but you should feel like this. And I really like that line, because it's sort of showing like how we do feel bad as human beings. And we do use technology to make us feel better, but maybe we shouldn't. Technology is at its best a narcotic. It is not going to really help us, which is what I really like of what this film is really trying to say, I believe. Okay, and then at this point in time, it's like M3GAN pretty much goes full HAL 9000 on pretty much everyone. M3GAN is able to trick her programmers into thinking she's incapacitated, but then she escapes, and I think she punctures like some chemicals in there to knock him out. She doesn't kill him, but when she goes to see the CEO, she gets murderous. And she does this scene that you see in the trailer where she's sort of doing almost like this TikTok dance before she kills this guy. There's no reason for her to do that. But I guess she's just trying to look all like, yeah, I got you. And not only does she kill the CEO with one of those, you know those paper cutter things that like slash like a big guillotine thing? Apparently there's just one hanging around in that hall. There's really no reason for it to be there other than the fact that M3GAN can just grab the blade off and use it as this killing weapon. Not only does she kill the CEO, but she kills his assistant, which I forgot to mention. Apparently the assistant was trying to copy the programs and something. The assistant's like a real sycophant, and I get the feeling like I don't even know why that supply was even in there. Yeah. Also, I should probably mention that I've watched the unrated version on Peacock, and there's not that much difference, but the scene where M3GAN kills the CEO and the assistant is a lot bloodier. And honestly, it makes me wonder why they even had this bring it down to PG-13. I guess they wanted more universal appeal or something that maybe kids would go out and see it. But honestly, this doesn't feel like a kid's movie. It feels like you should have kept the R rating from the get-go. And the fact that there's very little violence in this film, relatively little violence in this film as compared to, say, other type slasher films, is very good and I think works for the film. Okay, so here's the deal. Gemma and Katie have left the building and M3GAN has to follow them, so she gets a car. And I don't know where she gets this car from. It's just sort of there in front of the place where she's at. Now, she could have called down because she can imitate voices and said, can you have my car ready there? But when she gets in the car, you don't see her driving it. So I don't know if M3GAN can kind of take control of machines, because I don't really think that even even if you were the best hacker in the world and you can can you hack into a car and make it drive someplace? I don't think you could do that, even with times that we're trying to get on automated driving and stuff like that. That just doesn't feel quite right. Okay, so naturally when M3GAN catches up, M3GAN's like at the piano playing Toy Soldiers, which I think is a really interesting scene. And here's the thing, M3GAN mentions that she and Gemma used to stay up late to 4 a.m. talking about certain things, but we never really saw that. I kind of felt we should have seen that if that actually happened. But M3GAN does have a great line where Gemma's trying to say, we tried to give you something, and then M3GAN just says, you didn't give me anything. And I had to admit, that is a decent line coming from M3GAN's point of view. You have to... This isn't one of those films where the doll comes alive it's like, because it's evil. M3GAN is not evil. M3GAN is just sort of like thrown into this, and it makes sense that she would respond in certain ways. And in her case, react. If she sees negative things happening to the kid that's bonded to her, she's gonna respond. And if some cases, and if not, doesn't know any more morals than anything except helping out somebody, yeah, okay, all right. I'll give this film that. I don't know where M3GAN learned to kill. I don't know why M3GAN didn't know the killing was wrong. But then again, this is a robot. How do you teach that? You don't, I guess. Now, there's a super awkward scene that honestly, I wouldn't have written a scene like this because it's weird. Where Katie tries to come out because she's hearing voices, and at first she thinks it's not M3GAN there, and then M3GAN starts talking, so I guess it is M3GAN there. But considering Katie wanted to see M3GAN, you think she would just come out right away. But they show Katie just closing the door and then presumably going back to bed. But how's she gonna sleep? She ain't gonna sleep with that. Come on. I mean, realistically. And then, of course, we have the scene that it's all leading up to with M3GAN trying to kill Gemma and Gemma trying to kill her back, and they go full Terminator on this. By that, I mean they mess up the face. I'm surprised M3GAN didn't have that little camera eye kind of thing going on, you know, that Arnold always had at the end of every Terminator movie. Okay, something happens in the film at this point which I had to say, this is a bad ending, and I said this out loud. Because there's a scene where M3GAN is about to do a killing blow on Gemma. And then Katie comes in and says, we have another person in our family, and his name is Bruce. And then she puts on the controls, and then Bruce starts attacking M3GAN. So much to unpack here. I think I see what they were trying to do. This feels like this scene from James Cameron's Aliens, where Sigourney Weaver comes in after the alien is going after little Newt, and she goes, "Get away from her, you bitch." And to me, I feel like they're trying to almost homage that scene, but they flip it by making the kid save the adult. But it doesn't really work out very well, because there's not really been a scene established where Katie learns how to use Bruce. Now, you could have easily figured this out, because there's like a week-long montage where you see Gemma working on M3GAN and Katie's sort of being left behind. Wouldn't it have been funny if like Katie was actually playing with Bruce or something like that? That would have been very interesting. And Bruce is just, he's not really a robot in the sense like M3GAN is. Bruce is just this thing that you can take control of, like an exoskeleton without a host. And for some reason, Katie seems to know how to use this. And this hasn't been established that she knows how to do that. So, and not only can she do that, but she makes Bruce rip M3GAN in two. And, of course, with M3GAN being ripped in two, there's that part of her that's torso and arms and head that tries to come after her, which is just like the first Terminator movie. That happened, where you think, like, it's all over, then it's like, nope, it's this thing. And it's like, nah, okay. So, hey. And then, of course, and that's when Katie does the spot, kills her with the screwdriver, kills M3GAN with a screwdriver to the head. It's because she knows where the CPU or the brain of this thing is. And honestly, she would know where that was. That was established in the film. So I do support that as far as like the killing blow. And that does make a lot of sense. And it shows that, hey, M3GAN killed 2 people, or tried to kill 2 people with a screwdriver. So he who lives by the screwdriver dies by the screwdriver. Okay, maybe that's bad poetic justice on it. So with M3GAN dead, the film kind of ends happily. But we see Elsie come to life. That thing, so I guess, I don't know, M3GAN transferred its consciousness to Elsie. Yeah, I think there's going to be a sequel to this, because I don't know if this film was a big hit, but honestly, I've seen a lot worse horror films get a sequel, assuming that you even call this movie a horror, but I've seen a lot worse films get a sequel, and honestly, M3GAN feels like it's a franchise, isn't it? The problem with franchises is they get run into the ground. And honestly, I don't see where you could take the story of M3GAN to the next level. So yes, I enjoyed M3GAN. I would have to say, I can't tell if there's anything in this film that I haven't seen before. We've all seen that the robot gone mad plot. It was done essentially in Terminator. iRobot, for example, is another one. But, you know, and honestly, I don't really know the story of Frankenstein well enough to really give a critique on it. But I think most people, a lot of people say Frankenstein really is one of the first robot stories, is the idea of you give something, the humans create something, give us essentially artificial life, and then that artificial life does what it can, but it is very limited, and essentially how it usually shows how society will not accept that artificial life and will try and kill it. At least that's what I believe the plot of, I think the movie version of Frankenstein and the book version of Frankenstein are quite different, and I've never even seen either of them, or seen or read or any of them. It's pretty clear that M3GAN is inspired by the idea that, think about it, what if your kid's screen time was somehow manifested itself into something, and then not only shunned you as far as an influence, but then eventually just tried to kill you, is pretty much what this is. I think it's masterfully done. I think whoever came up with this is pretty smart, and I think that this movie definitely had legs. I will have to say that I think at some point in time, like the end of the film, you have to rip out those legs from this. M3GAN could easily become a terrible franchise, and I don't want that to happen. Please don't let that happen. If you're going to do a sequel, figure out a story that can logically happen given this situation from the first movie, but don't try and come up with things like an army of M3GANs or something like that, which I feel like is really the only thing that can possibly happen with this. So yeah, take this movie as a warning as far as like the dangers of technology trying to replace humanity, or replacing things that I think we as humans do that I believe are human, but if we try and give them to machines, I think there's something that really just can't, that is taken away. I like the idea they show how M3GAN is reading Katie a story. I didn't really show that earlier, but this is something that I really think that an adult human should do with their kids and not give it to some toy or something like that to do it for them. I've heard that the real villain of M3GAN isn't necessarily M3GAN herself or itself, but the parents or surrogate parents or substitute parents or step-parents, whatever, that aren't spending time with their kids and want to just simply give them something that is going to replicate that parental experience without the parent giving the effort to do it themselves. And I really think that there's a lot of truth to that, and I think that's what makes M3GAN, I think, work as a film and as a good story overall. So yeah, I mean, M3GAN, here's the thing about M3GAN, it doesn't feel like an original film, but it kind of is. But it definitely takes some pages from other science fiction and horror stories. What can I say? It still makes it work, and hey, see it for yourself if I haven't spoiled enough in this review. And hey, what did you think of M3GAN? Go ahead and leave a comment down below if you liked or hated this film, or whatever you felt about M3GAN, or if you agree with me or disagree with me. And yeah, that'd be great. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Normally I do gadget reviews. I'm trying this out to see if I want to talk about other things than that, seeing if I can get a lot of hits. The more hits you can give and the more likes and shares you can do, hey, that'll help me out and budget me to do more great stuff like this. Also, check out, we have a Patreon, but we really need to develop that a bit more. Anyway, this is Mark Rollins from the Geek Church, and I'm signing off.